Most people don't realize that the loudest voice in their life is not the one coming from the outside. It's the whisper that stalks them in silence, the one echoing from within, the one that has never stopped judging, belittling, and repeating the same ancient wound with new words. That voice? It is not truth. It is a parasite. And it feeds on your belief. Negative thoughts are not just passing clouds in the sky of the mind, they are seeds planted long ago, often by others, that have grown into thorned vines wrapping around the architecture of the self. They disguise themselves as your own reasoning, your inner critic, your rational mind, but they are ghosts of every shameful glance, every betrayal, every time you were made to feel too much or not enough. Carl Jung knew this well. The shadow lives in all of us, and unless it is made conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. There is a point, perhaps you felt it, when the inner war becomes unbearable. When no external enemy could ever match the cruelty of your own mind. You look in the mirror and see a face, but behind the eyes lives an accuser. A relentless whisperer of doom. It tells you you're broken. That you failed too many times. That no one truly cares. And worst of all, it convinces you that this voice is you. But it is not. It is your jailer. The first lie the parasite tells you is this, that you are powerless. That the thought is in control, and you are its hostage. But the Stoics, with iron in their blood and silence in their wisdom, would tell you something different. Marcus Aurelius stood against the empire of chaos and wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Do you understand the magnitude of that truth? The tyrant can rule your world, the war can tear your life apart, but no one can dictate what you do with your own thought unless you give them the key. And yet, many do. They hand over the key. Every time you believe the voice that says you are unworthy, you forge a new chain. Every time you ruminate on what went wrong, what they said, what you didn't do, you deepen the illusion that the past is still alive and happening. But the past is dead. What survives is memory, and memory is just a story soaked in emotion, often retold by your wounds, not your wisdom. You were not born with this self-loathing. A child does not question its worth. It screams. It demands. It loves without asking if it's lovable. The negative thought came later, like a curse inherited down the lineage of pain. Perhaps from a mother who was never loved herself, or a father haunted by failure. Perhaps from a society that worships masks and crucifies the raw. But here is the truth you've forgotten: what was given to you unconsciously can be taken back consciously. And that is how you kill a negative thought, not by wrestling it, but by withdrawing your belief in it. The ego, so fragile, so easily offended, is a hungry beast. It thrives on proving others wrong, on being right, on being seen. But your true self? It does not argue with illusions. It watches. It waits. It reclaims. The moment you observe a thought, truly observe it, like a hawk circling prey, you begin to disarm its power. For the shadow cannot survive in the light of attention. Jung taught that what you resist, persists. But what you integrate becomes your ally. So you must stop fighting your thoughts like a soldier waging endless war. You must become the silent witness, the alchemist, the watcher at the threshold of the unconscious. Let the thought come. Let it speak. But do not answer. Do not kneel. Let it pass like wine through a broken window. And in that moment of pure awareness, you reclaim the throne. Because the war is not won by adding more noise. It is won by stillness. By becoming the one who sees rather than the one who reacts. Do you feel it now? That flicker of sovereignty rising from the ashes? That is not just your mind healing. That is your soul remembering who it was before it was told who to be. But healing is not a gentle process. It is not scented candles and whispered affirmations. Healing is violent, disorienting, divine. It is the shattering of illusions that kept you small. It is the betrayal of every belief that once felt like safety but was really a cage. Killing negative thoughts is not about calming your mind, it is about burning down the false kingdom that mind has built in your absence. Imagine standing before the ruins of that kingdom. Every self-deprecating story you've clung to crumbled. Every identity stitched from past rejection ash. There is grief in this. Because even pain becomes familiar, even chains begin to feel like comfort. But comfort is the seduction of the known, and liberation demands discomfort. If your soul is to breathe again, the old must die. Some thoughts do not leave quietly. They scream as they're exorcised. They disguise themselves as logic, as protection. Don't try again, they whisper, you'll just fail. Or, don't trust, remember what happened last time. But look closer. These are not truths. They are the voices of wounds unprocessed, of inner children abandoned, of shamed emotions left to rot in the cellar of the psyche. And here lies your true task, not to kill these thoughts in hatred, but to confront them with love so fierce it becomes terrifying to the lie. Not soft love. Not the passive kind. But the wild, primal love of a soul reclaiming its birthright. The lion's roar of self-worth that shakes every corner of the mind where fear once ruled. The Stoics knew this kind of power. Epictetus, born a slave, crippled and bound, yet freer than most emperors, said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And that reaction, that sacred space between stimulus and response, is where freedom is born. Most people live outside themselves, reacting like puppets to every thought, every insult, every imagined future. But the awakened ones, they respond. And their response is sovereign. Do you feel how different that is? Reactivity is unconscious servitude. Response is conscious authority. And the authority of your inner world is the only real power you will ever possess. You cannot control the world. But you can master how you meet it. And that mastery begins in the furnace of the mind, where thoughts rise like smoke and tempt you to believe them. But now, you do not inhale. Now, you see. Shadow work begins here. In that sacred pause. When the thought appears and you do not flinch. When the voice says, you are worthless, and you lean in, not away, and ask, whose voice are you really? And sometimes, it is your father's. Sometimes, a teacher who shamed you. Sometimes, your own voice distorted by years of pain. But in that question, in that fearless gaze, the illusion begins to dissolve. You see, killing negative thoughts isn't murder. It is disidentification. It is the peeling away of every false mask. You do not need to be positive all the time. That too is a trap. You only need to be awake. You only need to remember that you are not your thoughts, you are the one who observes them. You are the vastness in which they arise and fall, not the fleeting shadows themselves. And in this awakening, you start to see what thoughts are worth keeping. What beliefs are worth feeding. Not all thoughts are poison, some are guides. But only the sovereign mind can tell the difference. Only the one who has walked through the fire of self-rejection and come out hallowed, yet holy, can discern which inner voice is true. Most people never make it this far. They stop at the edge of the fire, afraid of what they might lose. But what would happen if you walked through it? What would be left of you on the other side? You. Only you. The mind, once ungoverned, is a tyrant disguised as a protector. It whispers of safety while building prisons. It speaks in the language of doubt, not because it seeks your demise, but because it was conditioned to survive. Every negative thought, every whisper of inadequacy or fear, once served a purpose. But what served your survival then may now sabotage your freedom. You are no longer the child who needed to shrink to be safe. You are no longer the abandoned lover trying to earn scraps of affection. You are no longer the scared soul begging for worth from people who couldn't even see themselves clearly. But the mind, the wounded mind, still remembers. And it holds those patterns like sacred scripts, replaying them because it fears what you might become without them. What would happen if you no longer believed you were unworthy? Who would you be if you stopped feeding the thought that says you're not enough? That question terrifies the ego. Because the ego does not want freedom. It wants control. And negative thoughts, those sharp little narratives you rehearse, are the ego's chains. Chains that bind you to the familiar. But the self, the eternal, deep, untouchable self, it wants only truth. And truth is not found in the noise. Truth emerges in the silence after the war. In the stillness you've always feared, because it meant being alone with your real voice. But that voice, your voice, is thunderous when you remember it. Not because it shouts, but because it knows. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." That suffering is self-inflicted, not because you are weak, but because you are hypnotized. Hypnotized by repetition. Thought becomes belief. Belief becomes identity. And soon, you forget there was ever a space between you and the thought. You wear the belief like a second skin, calling it you when it was never yours to begin with. So how do you kill a negative thought? You don't fight it like a beast, you starve it like a ghost. You stop feeding it with attention, with agreement, with emotional reaction. You become the sacred observer. The inner witness. And with that awareness, you watch the thought burn in the light of your presence. But awareness alone is not enough. It must be coupled with choice. And here is where your true power awakens. You must choose the thought that serves your highest self. Not the one that feeds your fear. Not the one that repeats the pain of your parents, your lovers, your culture. The one that brings you back to center. To clarity. To your sovereign soul. Do not confuse this with blind positivity. This is not about slapping affirmations on top of trauma. No. This is about conscious rebellion. It is about becoming dangerous to your own dysfunction. About saying no more, not to life, but to the lies within. There will be moments when the old thoughts return. They will knock on the doors of your awareness, seductive and familiar. You're too late, they'll say. You've ruined everything. They'll never love you again. But you will stand at that door like a warrior priestess, like a stoic emperor, like the awakened one, and you will not let them in. You will watch. You will feel. And you will choose differently. This is not easy work. It is sacred work. It is the path of individuation, of becoming whole. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is your chance to stop calling it fate. This is your moment to step out of the script and become the author. And slowly, as you begin to kill off each lie, not with violence, but with vision, something begins to rise within you. Something ancient. Something undamaged. The original self. The one before shame. The one before fear. The one that never needed to be loved to be worthy, never needed to be seen to be real. It has been waiting. And it remembers. There comes a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when the war within begins to still. It's not that the thoughts stop coming, they do. But their power fades. Like echoes in a vast cathedral, they lose volume the deeper you go into the silence of your being. This is the aftermath of psychic battle. You do not emerge untouched, but you emerge aware. And that is enough. Awareness does not promise peace, it promises power. The power to no longer be moved by every gust of inner wind. To no longer bend beneath every memory dressed in sorrow's cloak. You begin to notice something miraculous. The thoughts come, but they no longer define you. They no longer own you. They're like passing strangers on the street. You see them. You nod. And you move on. But let this be understood, killing negative thoughts is not about becoming emotionless. It is not about cold detachment. No, it is the opposite. It is about feeling everything without drowning in it. It is about reclaiming the throne in the midst of chaos. The true self does not suppress emotion, it alchemizes it. Rage becomes fuel. Sorrow becomes wisdom. Fear becomes a compass pointing toward where the soul has not yet dared to go. You start to realize how many of your negative thoughts were inherited. Not chosen. You absorbed them in moments of trauma, in households where love was conditional, in schools that punished individuality, in relationships where silence was safer than honesty. These thoughts are not yours. They are the voices of others disguised as your own. And your liberation depends on this recognition: you are not the voice. You are the listener. You are not the story. You are the space in which the story unfolds. In that realization, you stop reacting and begin reauthoring. You notice the thought that says, "I'm not good enough." And instead of fighting it, you examine it. You pull it apart like a scholar decoding an ancient manuscript. Who wrote this? When? Under what threat? And why have I kept it so long? Your psyche begins to soften under this gaze. No longer attacked, it opens. It begins to trust you again. The inner child, wounded and hidden, peeks out from behind shame's curtain. And you do not scold them. You hold them. You remind them that belief was never yours. It was never you. And in this tender embrace, something shifts. The inner saboteur, once fierce and dominant, begins to dissolve. Because what was once a demon was only a protector grown mad with isolation. And when the inner world is met with compassion rather than condemnation, even the darkest parts come into the light. Here is the truth most avoid: there is no single kill shot. No magic bullet for negative thoughts. Because the mind, like nature, moves in cycles. Thoughts will return. Shadows will rise. But the difference now is this: you no longer believe them by default. You no longer follow them into the abyss. You no longer lose yourself in their theater. You become the one who watches, who waits, who chooses. That is the essence of Stoic mastery. Not the elimination of suffering, but the elevation above it. Marcus Aurelius did not stop pain, he transcended its narrative. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, he wrote. And you, now awakened, choose the colors with care. And slowly, as days turn to weeks, and weeks to months, your inner world transforms. The landscape is no longer bleak and hostile. It becomes sacred ground. A garden, wild and untamed, but yours. You plant thoughts that empower. You prune beliefs that no longer nourish. And the soil of your soul grows fertile again. The mind becomes a tool, not a master. Emotion becomes energy, not identity. And your sense of self is no longer tied to performance, perception, or past. You become rooted, present, unshakable. Not because you are perfect, but because you are whole. And from this wholeness, a new voice emerges. Subtle at first, like a breeze through ancient trees. But soon it becomes thunder. It says things like, "You are allowed to rest. You are not behind. You are sacred, even when unseen." And you realize this voice was always there. It was just buried beneath noise. But now, you've cleared the way. Now, you can hear it. There is a strange quiet that follows the death of the old thoughts. A stillness not born from apathy, but from arrival. You are no longer running from yourself. No longer arguing with shadows. No longer trying to be good enough for a world that profits from your self-doubt. And in that sacred stillness, something returns, something ancient, elemental, forgotten. You begin to feel it in your chest, in your breath, in your bones. Not excitement. Not even peace. But presence. The kind of presence that cannot be taken away. Not by rejection. Not by failure. Not by loss. Because it does not depend on anything external. It is your original state. The one you were born with before they taught you shame. Before they taught you to compete, to compare, to chase approval like a starving dog. You have stopped chasing. And this is the moment when true power awakens. Not the power to control others. That is the power of the insecure. Not the power to predict the future. That is the fantasy of the anxious. But the power to meet this moment with your entire being. Without needing it to be different. Without needing you to be different. This is sovereignty. This is what the mystics, the Stoics, the sages all pointed to. The return to now untainted by thought, unburdened by story. You feel the thoughts arise. But now, you meet them like a storm walker meets rain. No panic. No resistance. Just breath. Just observation. Just calm. The thought says, you'll fail. And you nod, maybe. But I'll try. It says, you're not lovable. And you answer, that was never a requirement for being worthy. It says, you're too much or not enough. And you smile. That's your projection, not my truth. This is not arrogance. It is clarity. The clarity that comes when you stop outsourcing your reality to every passing mood and memory. When you stop being seduced by suffering. When you stop looking to be rescued and instead, become the rescuer of your own soul. You no longer ask, what if they don't accept me? Because you have already accepted yourself. You no longer wonder, what if I'm alone? Because solitude is no longer a sentence, it is a sanctuary. You no longer beg life to prove your worth. Because worth is not something life gives, it's something you remember. In this remembrance, the body softens. The nervous system unwinds. You sleep deeper. You speak slower. You stop rushing, proving, pleasing. You become dangerous to a world that relies on your self-abandonment to function. Because when you no longer believe your negative thoughts, you are no longer controllable. The people who used to manipulate you with silence or guilt, they lose their grip. The fears that once made you small, they shrink. The pain that once defined you becomes a story you carry with tenderness, not identity. You've outgrown the war. And no one taught you how, because no one could. This path is walked alone. But it leads you back to everyone. Because in shedding your illusion, you make space for love, real love, rooted in truth, not dependency. Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And now, stripped of mental noise, you glimpse that person. They are not perfect. But they are real. And the real is always beautiful, because it is whole. You stand now where few dare to reach. Beyond the thought. Beyond the mask. Beyond the need to fix what was never broken. You don't have to fight anymore. You don't have to shrink. You don't have to explain. The voice in your head may still echo from time to time, but you no longer obey it. You bless it. You release it. You walk past it. And in that walking slow, steady, sacred, you reclaim your life. Here, in this place beyond thought, you find something holy. Not in temples, not in books, but in breath. In silence. In yourself. You are not your pain. You are the space that holds it. You are not your fear. You are the one who faces it. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who watches them die and chooses to live anyway. You are free.